My hands are a diary of my life, written not in ink, but in scars and scents. Under my fingernails, a faint aroma of garlic, onion, and fresh bread seems to have taken up permanent residence. My fingertips hold the memory of thousands of scores on dough, and my palms are covered in a fine web of white scars from accidental burns and sharp knives. I am David. I am 62, and I am a chef. I have spent my entire conscious life in the kitchen, first in loud, steam-filled restaurants, and for the last 25 years, in the quiet of my own, where I raised my daughter, Sarah, all by myself. These hands know how to make a feast out of nothing. They remember how to rock a baby to sleep and how to expertly fillet a salmon. They became my only anchor in this world after an aggressive, swift illness stole my Eleanor from me. She left, leaving me with our 5-year-old Sarah, whose eyes were the color of a frightened fawn's, and an old, tattered notebook stained with oil and wine. In this notebook, in her elegant calligraphy, were her recipes. Not just instructions for cooking, but a chronicle of our happy life. That notebook became my Torah, and the kitchen, my comfort and my sanctuary. It was from this sacred book that I took today's recipe. Eleanor's lemon cake with a light Italian meringue. This was more than just a dish. It was a ritual, a password to enter our happiest days. Eleanor baked it only on special occasions. Its citrusy, sweet aroma wafting through the house was synonymous with celebration. So, when Sarah announced she was pregnant, I knew that for her baby shower, for the celebration of my future grandson's arrival, I had to bring this, not just a dessert, but a blessing from his grandmother, whom he would never have the chance to hug. I devoted 2 days to it. This wasn't cooking. It was a sacred rite. I took out the old mixer we had bought together with Ellie, sifted flour through a sieve that remembered her touch. Every step was a dive into the past. Zesting the bright yellow lemons, I remembered her laugh as she taught me to do it correctly, without touching the bitter white pith. Whipping the egg whites for the meringue, I saw her concentrated face before me, how she bit her lip, making sure not a single drop of yolk fell into the bowl. I wasn't just mixing ingredients. I was pouring all my tenderness, all my unspoken words, all my yearning love into that batter. When the cake was ready and cooling on the rack, tall, soaked in syrup, with a proud, torch-seared cap of meringue that looked like a snow-capped mountain peak, I felt an almost paternal pride. It was perfect. It wasn't a piece of pastry. It was my manifesto, a manifesto of my love. I found the largest, sturdiest box, carefully packed my creation inside, and drove to the address Sarah had casually dropped in a text message. Her friend's apartment, downtown. As I approached the neighborhood, I felt a vague unease growing inside me. There were glass towers, trendy boutiques with incomprehensible names, and people who looked like they had stepped out of the pages of a glossy magazine. My old, but reliable Ford Escape seemed like a prehistoric fossil here. The building where the party was held was a work of modern art, a loft complex of dark brick and glass. In the lobby sat a young man in a slim-fit jacket, a concierge. He followed me and my large cardboard box with a long, cold gaze that held poorly concealed bewilderment. The door to the apartment was opened by Sarah, my girl, my grown pregnant daughter. She was stunning in her loose silk dress, but her smile, meant for me, froze for a fraction of a second as her eyes flickered over my face, then down to my best sweater, still bought 5 years ago at Sears, to my simple corduroy pants, and lingered on the box in my hands. In her eyes, for one brief moment, I saw the thing that hurt me the most, a shadow of shame. "Dad, you're here!" How wonderful! Her voice was a little too loud, as if she were trying to drown out some inner awkwardness. She took the box from me. Oh, it's so heavy. What did you bring? A surprise, sweetheart. It's a cake. Mom's lemon cake. Her expression changed. The smile became strained. Mom's cake. Dad, why did you go to so much trouble? Really, you shouldn't have. I sent you the link to our gift registry. She led me inside, and I understood the reason for her embarrassment. I had stepped from my dusty, familiar world onto another planet. A huge, light-filled living room with panoramic windows and minimalist Scandinavian furniture. A dozen young women, all looking like sisters. Slim, inexpensive, deliberately casual outfits of beige and gray. They were lazily sipping rosé from large glasses and nibbling on tiny jewel-like appetizers from a wooden board. The air was filled with a complex scent, a mixture of some trendy perfume, sandalwood, and, I think, kale. I felt like an old, shaggy bear accidentally released into a modern art museum. I cleared my throat and said a general, "Good afternoon." In return, I received a few polite but utterly indifferent nods. Sarah, trying to keep a straight face, carried my box to the kitchen, which was open to the living room, and placed it on a huge island of white marble. A pause descended. All eyes were on this plain cardboard box, which looked as out of place here as a tractor on a ballet stage. "Okay, girls, a moment of your attention." Sarah's voice rang with tension. "My dad brought us a treat. He's a chef, you know. Well, he used to be, and he prepared for us a cake." With those words, she opened the box. My golden, homemade, love-scented cake was revealed to them in all its unfashionable glory. One of the girls, the one with cotton candy pink hair, tilted her head theatrically. "Oh, Sarah, darling, is that from that new vegan bakery? It's gluten-free, I hope." And then Sarah, my daughter, for whom I had once sold my dream car, did it. She let out a short, tinny laugh. "Oh, Jess, of course not," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "This is just, a family relic. My dad is a bit, old-fashioned. It's a very rustic cake with flour and sugar and all those terrible things, so don't mind it. It's just a sweet gesture. We're ordering our favorite avocado cream cupcakes later anyway." A rustic cake, an old-fashioned dad. The room filled with quiet, polite, well-mannered laughter. It wasn't a malicious cackle. It was much worse. It was condescending. The kind of laughter with which enlightened colonizers laugh at the naive rituals of natives. I froze. The smile I had glued to my face turned into a painful grimace. I looked at Sarah, but she was doing everything she could to avoid my gaze. She was already flitting around the room, refilling someone's wine, laughing at a joke I didn't hear. She was already one of them, and I was an artifact from her past that she had carelessly brought into the light and was now rushing to hide away again. I waited for a moment, when she was away from the others, and quietly approached her. "Sweetheart, I think I'm going to go. I'm not feeling well," I whispered. It was the truth. I was physically sick with humiliation. Undisguised relief washed over her face. "Yes, Dad, of course." "Don't overdo it. Thanks for stopping by. I'll call you." She pecked me on the cheek, her lips cold and quick, and immediately turned back to her guests. I left without looking back. In the elevator, with mirrored walls, I saw the reflection of an old, broken man. I went down, past the concierge who now looked at me with unconcealed pity, and walked out onto the cold, windy street. I sat in my car for probably an hour. I couldn't bring myself to turn the key in the ignition. I just stared at the lights of the alien, hostile city. There was no anger in me, only a bottomless, soul-sucking pain. She had apologized for my love, and in that moment, I understood that my gift, the most precious gift I had ever given, had not just been rejected. It had been mocked and trampled. The night after the baby shower was long and black as cold coffee. I didn't sleep. I roamed my quiet house, which had suddenly become a museum of my own sacrifices. Every object in it cried out about the past, about a time when I was her whole world. There was the worn teddy bear on the shelf in her old room. I won it for her at the county fair, spending $20 on a stupid shooting gallery just to see her squeal with delight. There was a scratch on the kitchen table. She made it in the 5th grade while clumsily trying to carve something out of wood for a school project. I didn't scold her then. I just sanded down the sharp edges. I sat down at the very table and dropped my head into my hands. Memory, that ruthless accountant, began to present me with its invoices. Invoices for 30 years of fatherhood. I remembered her first year of school. Eleanor was already gone. Sarah was a quiet, frightened little girl, afraid to be left alone. I was working as a sous chef downtown then, and my shift started at 10 in the morning. But I made a deal with the owner to come in 3 hours earlier, at 7, to do all the prep work for free. Peeling vegetables, making sauce bases. In return, I asked for only one thing: to be allowed to leave at 3 in the afternoon, to be on time to pick Sarah up from school. Every day, for 6 years, I woke up at 5. I'd make her breakfast, braid her hair, which I was terrible at, and walk her to school. Then I'd race to work. I was constantly sleep-deprived, but when I saw her running towards me after school and hugging my legs, all my fatigue would vanish. Then came the teenage years, the time when she began to realize that we didn't live like her friends' families. They had big houses. We had a modest apartment. Their fathers were lawyers and doctors. Mine was a cook who constantly smelled of onions. She started to feel ashamed. Ashamed of my old car, my simple clothes, my blue-collar friends. I saw it, but I pretended not to notice. I thought it would pass. I thought it was just her age. I remembered her high school graduation. She was one of the top students and was set to receive an award. A week before the ceremony, she came to me with a guilty look. "Dad, there's going to be a dinner for parents and graduates at an expensive restaurant. Maybe you shouldn't come. It's just, there's a dress code. Everyone will be so dressed up." I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. "Of course, sweetie. Don't worry about it. I'll be very busy at work that day." On the day of her graduation, I took a double shift. I worked for 18 hours straight until my legs felt like lead. I did it so I wouldn't have to sit at home, imagining her, beautiful and happy, receiving her award, while the seat next to her, her father's seat, was empty. The next day, she brought me the evening's program, with her name printed in it. "Thanks, Dad," she said, without looking me in the eye. And of course, college. She dreamed of a design school in New York. We had no chance. The tuition cost as much as an airplane wing, but she was so passionate about the idea that I couldn't say no. I sold the apartment that Eleanor and I had bought as our first family nest. I moved into a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat, and I put all the money from the sale into her education account. I remember helping her move into her dorm in New York. I drove her things halfway across the country in a rented van. I carried her boxes up to the 5th floor without an elevator. I assembled her IKEA furniture. Her roommate, a girl from a wealthy family, looked at me with curiosity and asked Sarah when she thought I wasn't listening, "Is that the workman you hired?" Sarah mumbled something incoherent, For all 4 years, I sent her almost my entire salary. I mostly ate whatever was left over in the restaurant kitchen after closing. I wore my old clothes until they started to fall apart at the seams, and Sarah would send me photos from her new, shiny life. Here she was at an exhibition in Soho. Here she was drinking cocktails on a trendy rooftop bar. Here she was at an internship at a famous design firm. I looked at these photos and felt proud. I thought my sacrifices were justified. I was creating a world for her in which she would be happy. When she met Mark, I was over the moon. He was from their world. Successful, confident, with the right connections. I thought that now she would be in safe hands. For their wedding, I took out a loan to pay for the reception. I wanted my little girl to have the very best. At the wedding itself, I felt like a ghost. I wandered among the well-dressed guests, not knowing who to talk to. Mark introduced me to his parents. This is David, Sarah's father. Not my father-in-law, just Sarah's father. His mother, an elegant woman in pearls, offered me 2 fingers for a handshake and immediately turned away. After the wedding, the gap between us became insurmountable. She called less and less. Our conversations became short and formal. She had entered Mark's family, and in this new coordinate system, there was no suitable place for me, an old cook. I lifted my head from the table. It was getting light outside. The cold morning light flooded my kitchen, and in that light, I saw my life with absolute clarity. It was a life of sacrifice, a life laid on the altar of love for my child. But the child grew up and turned away from the altar because she had found new, more brilliant and powerful gods. I stood up and went to the mirror in the hallway. An elderly man with tired eyes and hands that smelled of other people's feasts looked back at me. And I realized that in trying to build a perfect world for her, I had destroyed my own. I had given her everything I had, and she had apologized for it to her friends. The silence that followed the baby shower wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a heavy, viscous silence, full of unspoken words and unfulfilled hopes. A day passed, then a second, a third, a week. I was living in a kind of suspended animation. I automatically got up, automatically brewed coffee, automatically looked out the window. But my thoughts were far away. I was there, in that light-filled apartment, reliving my humiliation over and over again. Every time the phone made a sound, a news alert, a spam email, my heart would stop. A foolish, irrational hope that it was her, that her conscience had finally awakened. I would even rehearse in my mind what I would say. Something like, "It's okay, sweetie. I understand. You were just overwhelmed." I was ready to forgive her before she even asked for forgiveness. But the phone remained silent on the one thing that mattered. To distract myself, I threw myself into work. I got a part-time job at a small bakery in our neighborhood, helping them in the mornings. I kneaded dough, shaped loaves, watched the ovens. Working with my hands always saved me. It grounded me, brought me back to reality. But even here, among the smells of vanilla and cinnamon, I couldn't get rid of the bitter taste in my mouth. My colleagues, simple, boisterous bakers, would ask me why I was so gloomy. "You're about to be a grandpa, David. You should be glowing with happiness." I would force a smile and joke back. No one knew that the joy of anticipation was poisoned by the venom of shame. On the 8th day, a Saturday, when I came home from my morning shift and sat down in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, the phone beeped. A message from Sarah. I grabbed it with such haste that I almost dropped it. My fingers trembled as I opened the chat. The text was short. Dad, hi, hope you're okay. Just came from the doctor. Everything's great. The baby's growing. Thanks again for your sweet gift at the party. BTW, I was thinking, to make it easier for you, I've updated our baby registry on Amazon. There's a lot of useful stuff. If you decide to buy something for the christening, just pick from there. Here's the link. Kisses S. I reread the message 3 times, then once more, slowly, word by word. Sweet gift. To make it easier for you, here's the link. Not a word of regret, not a shadow of remorse, just a business-like patronizing concern for my convenience, as if I were an old, senile relative who needed to be carefully guided so he wouldn't do something foolish and buy the wrong thing. My love, my pain, my sleepless night, embodied in her mother's recipe, had been reduced to the level of a sweet but inappropriate souvenir, and in its place was offered a convenient, modern, socially approved way of showing affection. A click on a link. It was at that exact moment that something inside me finally broke. Not with a groan, but with a dry, cold snap. The last string that held my fatherly love taut had snapped. The pain was gone. The resentment evaporated. In their place formed an icy, ringing void, and in that void, a crystalline, cold clarity was born. I looked at that message, at that link leading to a world of soulless things, and I understood that I had been trying to speak the language of the heart to a person who had perfectly mastered the language of barcodes. She wants a gift from a list. She wants it to be easier. She wants my love to have a SKU and a price tag. I put the phone down. I stood up and walked to the window. The world outside the glass was the same as it had been 5 minutes ago, but I was looking at it with different eyes. The eyes of a man who had just been freed from a long, torturous slavery, the slavery of unrequited fatherly love. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer an old-fashioned dad. I was David, a man from whom almost everything had been taken, but they had forgotten to take the most important things: his mind, his honor, and his dignity. And I was going to use all 3 to teach her a lesson, a gift that could not be returned or exchanged, a gift she would be unwrapping for the rest of her life. The decision was made in an instant, but I nurtured the plan for several days. Like a chef developing a new, complex dish, I thought through every step, every ingredient, every detail of the presentation. My goal was not to poison, but to serve a bitter medicine, not to destroy, but to build something instructive. I started with the simplest thing: money. It was the language my daughter and her new circle understood best. On Monday morning, I put on my best suit and went to an Edward Jones financial advisory office in the center of our town. I wanted everything to be official, solid, with stamps and signatures. A young, energetic advisor named Kyle received me. He gave me a quick glance, assessing my potential value. "Mr. Miller, how can I help you? Looking to make your savings work for you." His smile was as precise as his hair part. "Exactly, Kyle," I replied. "I want to make them work for the future, for the very distant future." I laid out my plan. I wanted to take all my savings, the result of 40 years of work, a sold apartment, and total austerity, and invest them. Not in stocks, not in bonds. I wanted to establish an irrevocable trust fund. Kyle's interest was piqued. This was a major transaction. An excellent decision. A wise move. Asset protection, estate planning. The beneficiary will be your daughter, Miss Sarah. "No," I said, and Kyle's smile faded slightly. "The beneficiary will be my grandson, Leo David Miller." And I want to include a few unbreakable conditions in the trust's charter. He pulled a notepad closer. I'm listening very carefully. First and foremost, the beneficiary, Leo, will gain full access to the fund and its accumulated interest only upon reaching the age of 18, not a day sooner. Second, until that moment, no one, including his parents, my daughter Sarah, and her husband Mark, shall have any access to these funds. Not as guardians, not as administrators. They will not be able to withdraw a single dollar under any circumstances, be it for college tuition, medical needs, or anything else. Your company will be the trustee of the fund. Kyle reread his notes several times. Mr. Miller, these are quite harsh restrictions. You are depriving the parents of the ability to use these funds for the child's benefit before he comes of age. Are you sure? I am sure, Kyle, I said, looking him straight in the eye, that I want to give my grandson a fishing rod, not a fish, and I also want to be sure that this rod won't be sold to buy a new designer handbag. Can you ensure that? He realized it was useless to argue. Yes, sir. We can ensure that. The process took almost 2 weeks. A mountain of paperwork, signatures, legal formalities. When I left his office with a copy of the agreement in my hands, I didn't feel poorer. I felt freer. I had transformed my money from a source of conflict into a seed that would sprout many years from now and perhaps bear healthy fruit. But the money was just the garnish. The main course was the letter. One quiet evening, I locked myself in my study. I took out the best cream-colored paper I had been saving for special occasions. I filled my old Parker fountain pen, a gift from Eleanor on our 10th anniversary, and I began to write. It was the most difficult and most important letter of my life. To my grandson Leo, hello, little one. Although, by the time you read these words, you will no longer be little. You will be 18. You will be standing on the threshold of adult life, full of hopes, plans, and, I am sure, doubts. My name is David. I am your maternal grandfather. I don't know if we will be acquainted by then. Life is an unpredictable thing, but I want you to know, on the day you were born, I gave you a gift. And that gift is not the money that sits in your account. The money is just the shell. The real gift is the story I want to tell you. I was a chef. My life was spent among the smells of bread and spices. I believed that the purest and most honest form of love is to feed someone, to warm them, to give them the best you have. My whole life, I cooked for your mother, my daughter Sarah. I tried to give her the very best, often denying myself the necessities. I believed I was building a wonderful future for her. But I made a mistake. I tried so hard to feed her that I didn't notice she had lost her taste for simple, honest food. She was lured by the windows of expensive restaurants, dishes with beautiful names and minuscule portions. My love, expressed in labor and self-sacrifice, became something rustic and old-fashioned to her. Something to be ashamed of in front of her fashionable friends. One day, she made it clear that she preferred gifts that could be chosen from a link on the internet. And I decided to play by her rules. I took all my love, all my sacrifices, all my sleepless nights, and converted them into the sum that now belongs to you. I did this not out of anger. I did this out of hope. I hope that, as you grow up, you will understand the difference between price and value. This money is the price. It is the price of my broken heart, a sold car, unfulfilled dreams. But you are the one who will give it value. I ask you, do not spend it on tinsel. Do not buy a car more expensive than your neighbor's. Do not chase after brands that will be out of fashion tomorrow. Invest it in what cannot be bought from a link. Invest it in knowledge that will make you free, in experience that will make you wise, in a journey that will show you how vast and diverse the world is, in helping someone who needs it, in creating your own business that will feed your family. And most importantly, Leo, build a life in which you will never be ashamed of the people who love you. A life in which a homemade lemon cake will always be more valuable than the trendiest cupcake. This is my only recipe for happiness. I hope you find it to your taste. With a love that I hope you will never be ashamed of. Your grandfather, David. I was finishing the letter through tears. I carefully folded it, put it in an envelope, along with a copy of the bank agreement. I sealed it with a wax seal using my father's old signet. Now, everything was ready. The dish had cooled. All that was left was to wait for the right moment to serve it. The christening of my grandson, Leo David Miller, was scheduled for a clear, cold day in mid-October. The invitation Sarah sent was a work of art in itself. Thick cardstock, silver embossing, calligraphic font. Everything screamed of status and impeccable taste. The reception after the church service was to be held at a fashionable country club. I knew this would be another trial, another foray into enemy territory. But this time, I was ready. I was not a supplicant seeking approval, but the executor of my own final will. I put on my only decent suit, the one that hung in the closet for weddings and funerals, and tied the necktie Eleanor had once given me. I looked at myself in the mirror, old, but not broken. My gift was meticulously prepared. I bought an expensive, deep blue gift box. Inside, on a bed of crisp silk paper, I placed the wax-sealed envelope, and next to it, one other item, a small silver spoon. Very old. Engraved on its handle were the initials E.M. Eleanor Miller. It was my wife's spoon, a gift from her mother at her own christening. It was the only tangible object I added to my message, a symbol of the family continuity that my daughter was trying so hard to interrupt. The church was crowded and solemn, Mark's family in full force, their friends, Sarah's friends from that very baby shower, all the brilliant society that had laughed at my cake. They nodded to me with polite disdain. I answered them with a calm, barely perceptible smile. My composure seemed to unsettle them. Sarah, in an elegant cream-colored dress, held Leo in her arms. She looked a little tired, but radiant. When I approached to congratulate her, she said, "Dad, thank you for coming." There was no warmth in her voice. During the ceremony, I stood aside and looked at my tiny grandson. In his face, I searched for features of Eleanor, of myself, of our past. The priest spoke of faith, love, and family, and I thought of my own quiet ceremony, the transfer of a legacy that this little boy would only receive in 18 years. The reception at the country club was the apotheosis of conspicuous consumption. The gift table groaned under the weight of boxes from Tiffany & Company, Gucci, and Burberry. A mountain of branded items meant to symbolize love, but which in reality only symbolized wealth. When my turn came, I approached Sarah and Mark. I handed them my blue box. "This is for Leo," I said quietly but firmly. "But I have one request. Open it when you are alone. Not here." Sarah weighed the almost weightless box in her hands with surprise. Mark shot me a quick, suspicious glance. "All right, Dad. Thank you," Sarah said, placing the box with the other gifts. She was clearly disappointed by its size and weight. I didn't stay until the end. I excused myself, saying I had to get up early for work, said a polite goodbye, and left. As I was leaving, I caught Sarah's bewildered gaze in the rearview mirror. My behavior did not fit her script. I don't know when they opened the box. Most likely that same night, tired from the celebration and the guests. I imagined the scene, how they untie the satin ribbon, how Sarah stares with confusion at the single envelope and the old spoon, how she breaks the wax seal, how her face changes as she reads my letter. I waited for 2 days. I wasn't waiting for a call, I was just waiting. And on the third day, late in the evening, the phone rang. I picked it up. There was silence on the other end. I could only hear ragged, choked breathing. "Dad?" Sarah's voice finally whispered. It was broken. "Yes, sweetie," I answered evenly. I read everything. The letter. The bank papers. Grandma's spoon." She began to sob. These were not the petulant tears I had heard before. These were the deep, wrenching sobs of a person who had just peered into the abyss of her own soul and was horrified by what she saw. I waited, letting the tears flow. "Dad, how could you? All of it. All this time. And God, what an idiot I am. What a blind, ungrateful, horrible daughter. That cake. God, Dad, forgive me. I'm begging you. Forgive me." Her words were a torrent of incoherent remorse. "It's not about the cake, Sarah," I said, my voice as calm as the surface of a lake on a windless day. "It's about the fact that you traded something real for something fake. You were so afraid of seeming rustic that you yourself became empty and tasteless, like fat-free yogurt." "I'll fix it. I'll fix everything," she cried. "I don't want this money. I'll close the account." "You can't. It's irrevocable. That is my final word, my living will. It is a gift to your son, a gift that is meant to teach him what I failed to teach you." Silence fell again, filled with her sobs. "What do I do now, Dad?" she whispered. I stood up and walked to the window. The night was dark, but a thin sliver of dawn was already breaking in the east. A new day. "Start small, Sarah," I said. "Start by understanding what you're holding in your arms. Not an accessory baby who needs a gift registry, but a living soul. My grandson. You're a mother now. Try to really be one. And maybe, many years from now, you'll finally understand what it means to be a father. And when you do, call me. I'll be waiting." I hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. My house was quiet. But this silence was now filled with meaning. I walked over to Eleanor's old notebook lying on the kitchen table. I opened it to a random page. Apple strudel. I smiled. I would bake it tomorrow morning, just for myself. And for the first time in many long years, I would eat it without any bitterness. I would taste only apples, cinnamon, and a well-deserved hard-won peace.